After receiving numerous pleas for help, including from the Dream Flower Tower Master and former disciples of the Heavenly Flame Sect, the situation reached its peak with the unjust death of Moyu Lusheng. Luo Feng understood that the land of origin was a cruel world where the weak were prey to the strong. Although even ancient godly kings could not change this order, he believed that those who slaughtered innocent creatures for their own benefit deserved to die. After learning that Moyu Qingyan's younger brother had died and the situation in Huyang City was worsening, Luo Feng decided to leave the city and asked whether the Moyu family wanted to go with him. They agreed. Following the decision of Lord Luo, Luo Feng then ordered Marosa to rescue the Dream Flower Tower Master Araya and her companions. He allowed Marosa to display strength comparable to Elder Hartai but instructed him to control his power. Luo Feng and Marosa then separated to begin their actions. Inside the city lord's mansion, Moyu Hu grieved deeply over the death of his third child. Though he hated the Heartshadow sect, he knew he lacked the power to seek revenge against such a terrifying force. His only hope was that Lord Luo could safely take his family out of Huyang City. At the Moyu family's cave mansion, Moyu Lifeng swore to avenge his younger brother even if it took countless years. Luo Feng arrived through the void, collected all members and buildings of the Moyu family, and prepared to save the remaining people connected to him, including those from the 9 artifact shops established by former Heavenly Flame Sect disciples. Luo Feng arrived at Moyu's artifact shop, where the Heartshadow sect was looting all treasures, materials, and belongings of the cultivators inside. The Heartshadow sect had killed many artifact refiners, apprentices, and customers to intimidate everyone. Luo Feng learned that Moyu Lusheng had been killed simply because he spoke while trying to negotiate to avoid being searched. The disciple responsible, Chan Wuqi, admitted that he had massacred the victims and considered his actions completely justified. After understanding the truth, Luo Feng casually pointed his finger and instantly killed Chan Wuqi. He then collected all the survivors in the artifact shop to protect them. The death of Chan Wuqi caused panic among the Heartshadow sect disciples. The 3 super-large mechanical treasures guarding the area approached and questioned Luo Feng for killing their disciple. Luo Feng immediately released a terrifying blade attack that tore through space and destroyed one of the super-large mechanical treasures, killing the 11 eternal true gods controlling it and causing massive casualties among its disciples. The remaining Heartshadow sect members were terrified and fled. Luo Feng coldly declared that they dared to interrupt him while he was handling matters and were seeking death. After collecting the destroyed mechanical treasure, he traveled through the void to the next artifact shop to continue rescuing people and dealing with the Heartshadow sect. When Luo Feng made his move against the Heartshadow sect, the city lord's mansion immediately detected everything through the grand formation that covered the entire Huyang City. The eternal true gods stationed there remained on high alert, fearing an attack from the Heartshadow sect. They watched in shock as Luo Feng first killed an eternal true god of the Heartshadow sect and then destroyed a super-large mechanical treasure with a single slash. His blade tore open an enormous spatial rift, displaying a level of power that greatly surpassed General Yang and even Shui Yun. The leaders of the 5 great families gathered through their divine power incarnations to observe the recorded battle. Moli Xiao admitted that his own strength was far inferior to Shui Yun and believed Luo Feng's attack was even more terrifying than the power Shui Yun possessed. The Lord of Huyang concluded that if Luo Feng had fought Shui Yun outside the city, he likely could have killed him in only a few strikes. The leaders of the Wu family were delighted because Luo Feng turning against the Heartshadow sect would provide a major advantage to Huyang City. However, the leader of the Meiwu clan reminded everyone that Luo Feng had previously demanded an employment fee of 1 billion cosmic sand and that opposing the Heartshadow sect did not necessarily mean he would help them. Moli Xiao suggested that the Lord of Huyang immediately contact Luo Feng to offer assistance. The Lord of Huyang transmitted a message, warning him that his current situation was extremely dangerous and inviting him to enter the city lord's mansion. With Luo Feng's strength added to the city's defensive formation, the Heartshadow sect would have no chance of breaking through. He also informed Luo Feng that elite troops sent by the Marquis outside the city were ready to provide assistance. Luo Feng calmly rejected the offer, saying that the Heartshadow sect could not do anything to him. The Lord of Huyang reminded him that the Heartshadow sect was the remaining foundation of a godly king-level sect and should not be underestimated. Luo Feng replied that he would ask for help if necessary. After ending the communication, the Lord of Huyang informed the other leaders that Luo Feng had refused all assistance and even claimed the Heartshadow sect was not a threat to him. The leader of the Meiwu clan remarked that it was no wonder Luo Feng had never cared about the 5 great families. Considering his confidence and strength, Mo Li Xiao believed that unless a primal chaos realm expert personally acted, very few people could threaten Luo Feng. However, the Lord of Huyang believed the Heartshadow sect possessed numerous hidden methods and that no eternal true god had ever truly endured a full assault from them. He believed Luo Feng's greatest chance was probably to escape, but even escaping would already be an incredible achievement. Therefore, he secretly informed the elite forces outside the city to prepare to rescue Luo Feng if he fell into a desperate situation, hoping that doing so would earn the favor of such a powerful expert. At the same time, the Heartshadow sect's pillaging continued throughout Huyang City. At the 7 Fire Tower, the strongest of the 9 artifact shops founded by direct disciples of the Heavenly Flame sect, 3 eternal true gods of the Heartshadow sect entered casually and immediately began slaughtering. With simple gestures, they killed artifact refiners, apprentices, and customers in 3 different areas, reducing them to dust and leaving behind only their treasures. The 3 eternal true gods ordered everyone to hand over all valuables, warning that anyone who resisted would die. The surviving cultivators were filled with hatred and anger because many of their relatives and friends had been killed. But none dared to fight back against the overwhelming power of the Heartshadow sect. As the 3 eternal true gods left to plunder another organization, a gray-robed member of the Heartshadow sect named Chu Yi criticized their unnecessary slaughter. However, the younger eternal true god Chong believed that creating terror through killing would make pillaging more efficient. He also claimed that because the Heartshadow sect's teachings originated from the path of destruction, slaughter was necessary to experience the heart of destruction and better comprehend the sect's inheritance. Chu Yi disagreed. He remembered the ancient legends of the sector beasts, creatures born from the path of destruction that only knew how to destroy. Those sector beasts were eventually besieged and killed by all major forces of the land of origin, and only the sector beast of the Tianmu kingdom survived because it became a servant and no longer slaughtered indiscriminately. He also recalled that the Heartshadow sect had once accidentally killed descendants of Great Saint Zhuyuan, causing the Great Saint's fury and leading to the sect's complete decline. In his opinion, the Heartshadow sect had learned nothing from that disaster. Although the founder of the Heartshadow sect had comprehended the path of destruction and left behind 5 emperor-level inheritances containing that path, the founder himself had long since died. Chu Yi believed that endless destruction would eventually lead to self-destruction. He had only returned from crossing the territories of 5 divine kingdoms to repay his master's kindness by helping establish the Heartshadow sect's new foundation. Once his debt was repaid, he intended to leave and never return because he disliked the sect's atmosphere. At that moment, Chu Yi suddenly sensed a terrifying presence. A black-robed figure appeared from the void, and an invisible blade aura naturally spread across heaven and earth. The moment he saw Luo Feng, Chu Yi understood that this was one of the strongest eternal true gods of Yu Kingdom and immediately realized he was far inferior to him. Luo Feng looked around the 7 Fire Tower and immediately noticed the scattered storage treasures and weapon secret treasures left behind after the massacre. The surviving artifact refiners recognized him as a disciple of the Heavenly Flame sect and respectfully explained everything. One of them even displayed the scene of the 3 eternal true gods murdering people as soon as they arrived. After understanding what happened, Luo Feng activated his realm of life and death, which already covered a vast area around him. With a single thought, the 3 eternal true gods were instantly suppressed and forcibly transported back into the 7 Fire Tower. The 3 eternal true gods were shocked and attempted to flatter Luo Feng, saying that the Heartshadow sect had always treated him with respect. At that exact moment, all Heartshadow sect disciples throughout Huyang City received an emergency command stating that Luo Feng had destroyed one of their super-large mechanical treasures and had become the sect's greatest enemy. Ordinary disciples were ordered to immediately flee if they encountered him because facing him would be equivalent to seeking death. The surrounding Heartshadow sect disciples immediately escaped in panic. However, the 3 captured eternal true gods understood that they were doomed. They continued begging for mercy. But Luo Feng did not even bother responding. Using the power of the realm of life and death, which transformed between creation and destruction like a massive taiji grinding disc. Luo Feng completely crushed the 3 eternal true gods into dust and killed them instantly. The artifact refiners, apprentices, and customers of the 7 Fire Tower were overjoyed and praised Luo Feng for delivering justice. Afterward, Luo Feng gathered the surviving cultivators with a wave of his hand and stepped through the void toward the next artifact shop to continue his attack against the Heartshadow sect. Only after Luo Feng departed did the nearby Heartshadow sect disciples dare to stop running, as they were terrified by his overwhelming strength. Watching everything from afar, Chu Yi sighed inwardly that he had repeatedly warned his junior brother Chong not to slaughter recklessly because every action in the world carried consequences. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Heartshadow sect within the Primal Chaos Armor sector, the sect leader and the 18 elders gathered, either in their true bodies or through divine power incarnations. An elder reported that Luo Feng had already killed 12 eternal true gods at the Moyu artifact shop and questioned whether the sect should continue tolerating him. The sect leader asked why Luo Feng had suddenly turned hostile, and an elder explained that the Moyu artifact shop belonged to Moyu Lusheng, the brother of Luo Feng's servant Moyu Qingyan, and that a Heartshadow sect disciple named Chan Wuqi had entered the shop to seize treasures and had killed many cultivators there, including Moyu Lusheng. After arriving at the Moyu artifact shop, Luo Feng immediately killed Chan Wuqi, and when the nearby super-large mechanical treasure Black Fire Beast questioned his actions, Luo Feng destroyed it with a single strike, killing 11 eternal true gods and numerous disciples inside, even declaring that they had no right to speak while he was acting and that they were simply seeking death. The elders considered Luo Feng extremely arrogant because he showed no respect for the Heartshadow sect. The sect leader initially still wanted to communicate with Luo Feng and avoid direct conflict. But before he could act, Luo Feng once again attacked the 7 Fire Tower and killed 3 more eternal true gods in front of the entire city. The 18 elders could no longer tolerate such humiliation and argued that if the Heartshadow sect continued to endure Luo Feng's attacks, the disciples would lose their confidence and morale. The sect leader understood that the Heartshadow sect was already loosely united only because they wished to establish a new foundation, and further retreat would cause even greater internal problems. After a moment of silence, the 3-eyed sect leader finally made his decision. His eyes filled with killing intent as he declared that the Heartshadow sect had already shown Luo Feng enough respect. But Luo Feng had trampled on the sect's dignity, and before fighting the armies of the Marquis of Zhujiang, they would use Luo Feng as a test and completely eliminate him. He ordered that this time they must kill Luo Feng and absolutely not allow him to escape. And all 18 elders accepted the command, abandoning any hesitation as the entire Heartshadow sect united with only one choice left: destroy the arrogant Lord Luohe. After leaving the Dream Flower Tower, Marosa used 2 void shuttles and arrived above an ordinary cave mansion in the Snow Winter district of Huyang City, where the Thousand Leaves Vine clan resided. Since Araya had already informed his clan about the situation, the members willingly followed Marosa and prepared to evacuate outside the city. Although some members were still absent, there was no time to gather everyone, and saving the majority was already fortunate. Marosa waved his hand and collected all the creatures, buildings, and resources of the entire cave mansion, leaving behind only empty ground and lakes. While carrying out the rescue, Marosa transmitted his thoughts to Luo Feng, reporting that he had already rescued the Dream Flower Tower Master, Araya, and almost all the creatures there. And since Araya had requested help, he had also saved the Thousand Leaves Vine clan. Luo Feng asked whether everything had gone smoothly, and Marosa replied that the Heartshadow sect knew he was Luo Feng's servant, so they did not dare attack him directly. And although they tried to interfere, he simply ignored them. Luo Feng then informed Marosa that the Heavenly Flame sect had established 9 artificing shops throughout the city and that he still needed help rescuing cultivators in 3 of them, but warned that after openly clashing with the Heartshadow sect, the enemy might no longer hold back. Marosa, however, was excited and even hoped they would attack. By this time, 5 eras had passed since Marosa entered the Primal Chaos realm. His godly body had reached its limit, and his comprehension of the great Tao of destruction origin had deepened significantly, even when suppressing his strength to a level similar to Elder Heartai. His techniques were far more mysterious, and if he wished to escape, the Heartshadow sect had no means to stop him. The only beings he truly feared were the ancient godly kings of the land of origin. Which was why he continued obeying Luo Feng and acting as a low-profile protector. Even deliberately using 3 void shuttles to maintain his disguise before arriving at another artificing shop. Meanwhile, the sect leader and the 18 elders observed the battlefield through the sect Great Formation. Witnessing Luo Feng casually killing eternal true gods who slaughtered innocent cultivators and rescuing everyone. While Marosa did the same elsewhere. These scenes forced them to re-evaluate Marosa's strength, as he had previously disguised himself as an ordinary true god of void space. But since he had accompanied Luo Feng during the hunt for divine monarch Shui Yun, he was clearly no simple existence. What shocked them most was that even under suppression from the formation, Marosa could still easily perform void shuttling. And if this ability came from his own power rather than a mechanical flow secret treasure, his strength likely surpassed most elders. They concluded that Luo Feng and Marosa were likely connected to a powerful force. Possibly with Marosa acting as a protector assigned by a great power. Their differing specialties allowing them to compensate for each other's weaknesses. Although some elders became worried, the sect leader remained calm and confident, explaining that the forces already dispatched were sufficient. At that moment, Chu Yi sent a message offering to take action personally. But the sect leader refused, as Chu Yi was a hidden trump card meant for the future battle against the Marquis of Zhu Yang's army. To deal with Luo Feng and Marosa, he intended to rely only on public forces, having already deployed the Heart Devil Kite, the 6 Shadows Killing Formation, and the Great Destruction Ultimate Formation, which together represented half of the sect's power and were believed sufficient to eliminate the enemies. He was especially confident because of Chu Yi, who, after cultivating outside for countless years, had reached a level close to Elder Heartai and mastered the godly king-level Heartshadow secret art to an extraordinary degree. This technique was the most revered and difficult among the sect's 5 inheritances and the origin of the sect's name. With it, Chu Yi could control the demon general of Heartshadow, making him even more formidable than Elder Heartai controlling the Heart Devil Kite. Despite his strength, Chu Yi was arrogant and rarely interacted with others. And the sect leader regretted that both he and Elder Heartai would leave after the war, as many disciples across the land of origin had already ignored the sect's summons. Back on the battlefield, the elders anxiously watched Luo Feng continue slaughtering their disciples with ease and asked whether Elder Heartai had arrived. He explained that using only the Heart Devil Kite allowed him merely to match Luo Feng, and appearing too early would cause Luo Feng to escape. So he was waiting for the 6 Shadows Killing Formation to arrive and combine forces to trap him. After which the Great Destruction Ultimate Formation, controlled by 360 eternal true gods, would activate and annihilate him completely. Within the city lord's mansion, the leaders of the 5 great families observed the battle and were surprised that Marosa's strength appeared no weaker than divine monarch Shui Yun, while Luo Feng's strength was expected. Having such a powerful servant indicated an extraordinary background, further proven by the fact that he had rejected recruitment from the princess representing the nation's ruler. The leaders grew more confident, as Luo Feng and Marosa together were equivalent to 2 elite armies. At the Flame Wind Pavilion, Emperor Chu Yu also observed the conflict and acknowledged Luo Feng's deep accumulation and understanding of the primal chaos realm, but believed his path was chaotic because it combined the essence of the great Tao of life with the path of destruction. Since he pursued 2 directions without a complete inheritance, his progress would become difficult, as true cultivation required focusing on a single origin great Tao. Nevertheless, Emperor Chu Yu believed this was not a major issue, as Luo Feng would eventually return to the Flame Wind ancient country and receive part of Emperor Chu's lineage inheritance, allowing him to follow a more proper cultivation path. During this time, Luo Feng continued moving through the city, rescuing every artifact refiner, apprentice, and customer he encountered inside the artificing shops. Any eternal true god of the Heartshadow sect who was carrying out massacres was casually killed by him. However, what puzzled Luo Feng was that the Heartshadow sect's true killing forces had not appeared despite the time that had passed. After taking over the 5th artificing shop, the artifact refiners and apprentices were extremely excited to see Luo Feng. The surrounding Heartshadow sect disciples, however, immediately fled in fear. At that moment, Luo Feng's realm of life and death sensed a dangerous presence approaching. He instantly collected all the remaining cultivators with a wave of his hand and looked toward the distance. There, he saw a massive black avian-shaped mechanical treasure approaching alongside 6 enormous mechanical secret treasures that formed a powerful formation. Luo Feng immediately recognized the black creature as the Heart Devil Kite, one of the most famous sect protecting treasures of the Heartshadow sect. Although the sect possessed many powerful treasures accumulated over endless years, some had been lost, and many of those remaining had extremely high requirements that ordinary members could not control. Before the battle began, Luo Feng sent another artificing shop's location to Marosa, entrusting the remaining 4 shops to him. Marosa confidently accepted the task, as he had still not encountered any serious resistance. The Heart Devil Kite then spoke, declaring that the Heartshadow sect had already shown Luo Feng respect. Yet he continued to act arrogantly and recklessly, meaning he was seeking his own death. Luo Feng had no interest in exchanging words because the longer the battle continued, the more forces the Heartshadow sect would gather. He immediately shot into the sky. The sect Great Formation unleashed its full power, creating a massive dark vortex that descended to suppress and bind him. At the same time, the Heart Devil Kite and the 6 Shadows Killing Formation launched their attacks. Luo Feng burned his divine power and unleashed the realm of life and death. A vast taiji-like domain expanded from his body and violently crushed the dark vortex created by the sect Great Formation. Since the sect formation had to cover the entire city, its suppression against a single individual was only slightly stronger than Huyang City's original formation and was far weaker than Luo Feng's domain. The enormous life and death realm spread across the battlefield with Luo Feng standing at its center while holding the Bloodshadow blade. At that moment, the 6 Shadows Killing Formation activated. 6 gigantic blurry shadows appeared in 6 different directions, sealing the entire region and trapping Luo Feng inside. Immediately afterward, the Heart Devil Kite released a terrifying cry that transformed into a direct attack against Luo Feng's will. At the same time, it extended its sharp claws, tearing through space and creating massive cracks in the void as it launched a deadly physical attack. However, when its will attack collided with Luo Feng's consciousness, the difference between them was like a fragile egg crashing against an unmovable mountain. Elder Heart-Eye commanded the Heart Devil Kite, accompanied by 12 eternal true gods and over 10,000 void space true gods. The Heart Devil Kite was not an ordinary super-large mechanical secret treasure but one of the Heartshadow sect's ultimate sect-protecting treasures. Personally designed by the God King who founded the sect based on the 6 extremes of destruction, godly king inheritance. Its control threshold was extremely high, and within the entire Heartshadow sect, aside from Elder Heart-Eye, only the hidden expert Chu Yi could fully control it. The greatest ability of the Heart Devil Kite was that it could completely unite the power and spiritual wills of all its users. Under Elder Heart-Eye's command, everyone merged their wills together and launched a terrifying spiritual attack. Elder Heart-Eye's own will had reached the level of an ordinary primal chaos realm expert. And after being amplified through the Heart Devil Kite, the attack reached the level known as the pinnacle primal chaos will. Elder Heart-Eye was extremely confident in this attack. He never expected to kill Luo Feng with a will attack because, in the land of origin, unless the gap in spiritual will was unimaginably large, ordinary will clashes usually only caused damage to the opponent's consciousness and reduced their combat strength. His goal was to severely injure Luo He's will, greatly weaken his battle power, and then use the Heart Devil Kite together with the 6 Shadows Killing Formation to completely suppress him. However, when Luo Feng felt the incoming will attack, he was only slightly surprised. He had never intended to reveal too much of his true strength. In fact, with his godly king-level will, even without using the Lai Yuan technique, a single glance was enough to kill almost all the Heartshadow sect disciples. Only figures like Elder Heart-Eye, Chu Yi, the sect master, and fewer than 10 others could possibly survive. Luo Feng intentionally concealed his strength because killing Elder Heart-Eye with a glance would create a shocking scene that could attract the attention of the god kings of the Yu Kingdom and Shi Kingdom. He was already very close to breaking through to the primal chaos realm and only needed a little more time. Once he reached that realm, possessing a godly king level will would be considered more acceptable, as some primal chaos overlords were also capable of reaching such a level. And his ability to protect himself would greatly increase. Luo Feng had always planned to keep his displayed strength only slightly above the strongest eternal true gods of the Yu kingdom. He did not wish to expose abilities that might cause ancient god kings to notice him. Although some god kings might choose to nurture him, others might choose to kill, enslave, or control him. Following his master mountain-sitting guest's advice, Luo Feng had always remained patient and low profile because the waters of the land of origin were far too deep. When the hard devil kite's powerful will attack collided with Luo Feng's consciousness, the terrifying difference between their wills instantly caused a rebound. Elder Heartshadow, the eternal true gods, and the tens of thousands of void space true gods inside the heart devil kite all felt as if their consciousness was being torn apart and suffered unbearable pain. Realizing the danger, Elder Heartshadow immediately understood that Luo he possessed a pinnacle primal chaos level will and that his will techniques were extremely extraordinary. He quickly sent a message to the 6 shadows killing formation, ordering all 6 mechanical secret treasures to retreat. The controllers of the formation were confused because they had already trapped Luo he and were preparing to suppress him. But Elder Heartshadow knew that continuing the battle would be extremely dangerous. Since his willpower had already been exposed, Luo Feng decided to display a little more of his strength. However, he still carefully restrained both his divine body and his spiritual will. He knew that if he fully released either one of them, he would be capable of sweeping through the entire Heartshadow sect, which would inevitably attract the attention of the ancient god kings. Luo Feng drew the godly king-level blade embryo, the Bloodshadow knife, and unleashed a brilliant blade strike. The blade was like a chef slicing through meat, cutting through the void itself and pursuing the retreating heart devil kite. When the blade struck the heart devil kite, Luo Feng discovered that its defense was incredibly powerful, comparable to a primal chaos realm weapon secret treasure. The Bloodshadow knife could not physically split it apart. However, the energy and the will contained within the blade penetrated the heart devil kite and directly attacked the minds of everyone inside. This attack was the first chaos realm saber technique that Luo Feng had created. The heart honing technique. During the 5 eras since its creation, heart honing had evolved into multiple forms. The current strike combined 6 different chaos realm saber moves into a single attack and naturally integrated the secret will technique Luo Feng had comprehended from the Calamity Beast diagram. 5 eras earlier, Luo Feng had already possessed a godly king-level will, but at that time he had only studied a small portion of the 3000 void Calamity Beast diagram. After continuously studying the complete diagram, his understanding of spiritual will deepened, allowing him to create a complete set of will techniques consisting of 3 moves. The first move of this secret will technique was integrated into heart honing. It was a technique designed to destroy both the enemy's divine body and their spirit simultaneously. After being struck by the blade, the heart devil kite was sent flying backward. All of the controllers inside felt as though their souls had been slashed by another blade, suffering immense pain. Fortunately, Luo Feng only used a tiny strand of his will, greatly limiting the attack's power, so they merely suffered pain rather than death. The same blade then swept across the 6 shadows killing formation. Unlike the heart devil kite, the 6 super-large mechanical secret treasures did not have the ability to unite the spiritual wills of all their members. Each treasure was controlled only through the will of its leader. Under Luo Feng's heart honing strike, which contained his own secret will technique, 5 of the 6 leaders instantly had their consciousness collapse and fell unconscious. Only one leader barely maintained awareness and escaped with his mechanical treasure. Because the 5 leaders had lost consciousness, their mechanical secret treasures lost their ability to properly defend themselves. Luo Feng's blade light easily split open the 5 treasures. The ordinary members inside, whose consciousness had not been connected to the leaders, remained awake. Seeing the destruction of their mechanical treasures, they became terrified and immediately scattered in all directions. Luo Feng casually waved his hand and collected the 5 broken super-large mechanical secret treasures as spoils of war. Watching this scene, the Heartshadow sect master and the 18 elders were shocked and furious. Elder Heartshadow reported that Luo he possessed a pinnacle primal chaos level will and that even the sect protecting heart devil kite, with its unified spiritual will, could not compete against him. They could not imagine that Luo Feng's true will had actually reached the godly king level. In the land of origin, many outstanding eternal true gods, such as divine monarch Shui Yun, Mo Li Shao, and Zhu Hu, possessed the threshold level of primal chaos will. Elder Hartai and Chu Yi, who cultivated godly king inheritances, had ordinary primal chaos level wills. Even in the ancient countries, some supreme geniuses could reach the pinnacle primal chaos will while still being eternal true gods. Therefore, they naturally assumed Luo he was merely one of these extraordinary geniuses. Despite the heavy losses, the Heartshadow sect remained confident. The sect master revealed that they still possessed their ultimate trump card, the Great Destruction Ultimate Formation. This terrifying formation had been personally created by a god king and required 360 eternal true gods to cooperate with the formation diagram, allowing their power and spirits to become one. The Heartshadow sect believed that no eternal true god could withstand such a supreme formation. At the city lord's mansion, the leaders of the 5 great families witnessed the entire battle with excitement. Moli Xiao analyzed that in ordinary combat, the Heart Devil Kite and the 6 Shadows killing formation could have restrained Luo He. However, because Luo He's spiritual will was overwhelmingly stronger, the Heart Devil Kite could not unleash its full strength, and the 6 Shadows killing formation completely lost its ability to resist. They concluded that Luo He's will must have reached the pinnacle primal chaos realm. Such a level was already comparable to the most elite eternal true gods cultivated by the 2 ancient countries. The information was immediately sent to the marquis, and everyone's confidence in winning the battle greatly increased. Meanwhile, at the Flame Wind Pavilion, Emperor Chu Yu, who had already stepped into the primal chaos realm, observed the battle more clearly than others. He saw that Luo Feng's blade contained both physical destruction and a will attack. He believed that the Heart Devil Kite escaping was understandable because it was a sect protecting treasure with extraordinary defensive abilities. But he was surprised that one of the 6 Shadows killing formation's treasures managed to escape. Chu Yu believed that if he had possessed Luo Feng's level of strength when he was an eternal true god, none of the 6 Shadows killing formation's treasures would have escaped. After Luo Feng collected the 5 destroyed mechanical treasures, the Heart Devil Kite and the remaining mechanical treasure had already fled far into the distance. At that moment, Marosa crossed the void and arrived beside Luo Feng. He happily reported that he had completed the mission assigned by his master and had also casually killed some eternal true gods of the Heartshadow sect because they had been cruelly massacring innocent lives. Something he knew Luo Feng disliked. Luo Feng praised Marosa's actions, making him extremely delighted. However, Luo Feng soon looked toward the distant sky. A gigantic and overwhelming formation covered half of the heavens and was rapidly approaching. Even Luo Feng felt a sense of pressure from this formation and could not help but remark that it was an extremely powerful killing formation.